Russian veterans were shocked to find that the temperature of the torpedo's nuclear warhead was 130 degrees and immediately opened the torpedo compartment and prepared to launch. At this time, the temperature of the torpedo warhead was 148 degrees and continued to rise without stopping, but had to be approved by the captain of the boat. But the answer was to wait 5 minutes, but by now the temperature had already reached 168 degrees. The veteran looked anxiously at the new recruit's watch and decided to launch immediately after weighing the pros and cons of the situation, but it was too late. The torpedo suddenly exploded and a wave of air blew away the Russians in both compartments. The nuclear submarine immediately lost control of power and began to sink into the depths of the sea, eventually hitting the seabed head-on and sliding through the mud for 5 minutes before finally coming to a stop. As soon as the submarine came to a halt, the Russians immediately closed all the hatches to prevent a possible secondary explosion and to prevent the seawater from pouring in. As soon as the hatches were closed as much as possible, they contacted the command module, hoping to surface as soon as possible to call for help. But no matter how much they shouted, there was no response from the command module. The worst thing that happened was that the command module had already been reduced to flames by the explosion, and the flames were scorching the other torpedoes, which could explode again at any time. If the nuclear submarine explodes again, there is a risk of nuclear leakage. The Russians anxiously watched the monitors, praying that there would be no more explosions, but it was too late. All the monitors showing the temperature of the torpedo's warheads turned black, proving that the temperature was far above the critical point. Without giving the Russians time to despair, the torpedo in the torpedo compartment exploded again. The equivalent of 16 tons of TNT detonated together, engulfing all Russians in flames. The explosion destroyed almost the entire submarine, and the sea immediately rose up in mushroom-shaped waves like the end of the world, plunging every Russian on board into deep despair. When the explosion finally stops, the sea pours back into the submarine, making all the submariners experience the feeling of a tsunami. Finally, someone realized that there was still hope for rescue and shouted to the aft cabin No. 9 to take refuge. The rest of the submariners could not think too much and ran for their lives to cabin No. 9 by instinct. Anton immediately radioed cabin 5 and yelled for everyone to evacuate to cabin 9, but cabin 5 refused. The reactor's cooling system had failed, and failure to activate the passive system immediately could cause a worldwide catastrophe. With a heavy heart, Anton hung up the radio and led the other survivors to evacuate to Module 9, and when all of them entered Module 9, they immediately locked the door and immediately counted the number of survivors. Only 23 out of a group of 118 were left. The Russians finally breathed a sigh of relief and told what they knew. Some suggested using the hatch to escape from the submarine, but this was the bottom of the sea and there was nowhere to escape to. Anton, the highest-ranking officer among them, immediately organized a division of labor and restored order to the Russians. At the same time, in order to let the outside world know that there are still survivors on the submarine, I myself, with a hammer, knocked on the hatch 4 times every hour. The submarine had been under close surveillance by NATO headquarters since it left for its maneuvers. When the submarine exploded, NATO headquarters received the news and immediately located the submarine on a map in order to steal the Russian nuclear submarine's military secrets and notify the Norwegian government. The Russian military headquarters is also in a state of